This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. It's a random week here in the summer, but we have a great guest that we had a chance to speak with a little bit earlier today. Phil Steele. For the fifth straight year, nobody knows anything more about college football than Phil does, and he's going to talk Arizona football with us in segment number 2. But Shane, I mean, we're getting that much closer to football season. Would you say that your excitement level is starting to amp up for college football and Arizona football?
It's getting close, Eric. You know, I think of all the weeks of Arizona athletics, this is one of them. I would put it that way. It's tough. I know Arizona, they're sending out emails like 7 Saturdays till football season, 6 Saturdays. So I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah.
I'm headed to the National Card Show next week in Chicago, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I think when I get back, it's going to be August. Football season, the football month is going to be here, and then I'll be a little more excited. But great to have Phil on. We were talking before the show. Is it 4 years or 5 now? And just like, sure enough, the first time we had Phil Steele on was before Jed Fish's first year in Tucson. So he's been kind enough to join us each year, and just an encyclopedia of college football information. It's all he does.
You know, for all the changes that we've gone through, new coaches, new conferences, all that, one thing has been consistent on this program, and that is Phil Steele every July. So yep. We're looking forward to having him back on. All right, let's get into buy or sell, Shane, and start with number 1. We're opening the show with a tough one this week. So which Arizona sports team, not necessarily a buy or sell, but, roll with it here. Which Arizona sports team in 2025-26 will give us the biggest thrill ride this season? Football, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, or baseball?
I like how you intentionally, I think, leave some of these questions open to interpretation. Because, I love, you think thrill rides, you think roller coasters. I love roller coasters when I was a kid until I was 8 and my family went to Knott's Berry Farm. And then I went on a roller coaster that I didn't realize went upside down. And that's when I decided I did not like roller coasters anymore.
I never liked them.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say thrill ride, that can be both a good thing and a bad thing. So I'll just take it the direction that I want, and that easy answer. But I think it's got to be men's basketball. Even with so many guys leaving, they look like they've reloaded adequately, like they have every year with Tommy Lloyd. Although this team is a bit more freshman heavy than previous Tommy Lloyd teams, I could see them being a top 5 team nationally, and I could see them being an 8 or a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. So. From that perspective, I think next season is going to have some similarities to last season. Some struggles early as the freshmen get their footing, but with things coming together more toward the end of the season. And another team that with momentum and the right matchups and being battle-tested from beginning to end, maybe they're the ones that finally get Tommy past the Sweet 16 in March. It's difficult without Carter Bryant coming back to be as excited, but there's more wild cards, I would say, in the mix, because you have so many guys who have a potential, but you just don't know yet, from the international guys to the incoming high school commits. But yeah, I think Arizona basketball is always a thrill ride, but again, it's open to interpretation whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And toward the end of the season, unfortunately, it's not been a good thing lately.
All right, so I'm going to agree with you. And I think this past year we could both agree, if you were to rank the thrill rides, I mean, football put us on a ride. I'm not sure I'd call it a thrill.
Yeah, a ride.
Men's basketball really gave us quite a thrill ride starting in January. And baseball gave us a thrill ride, but it wasn't. I mean, we kind of picked up on baseball a little bit later on. So I would say basketball for the longer, duration is why they captured the thrill ride crown last year. And I think they're going to do it again this year. And I think for the reason that you said, Shane, like, we don't know what to expect. Yeah. Is this team top 10 good? Is this team not top 25 good? We think they're pretty good, and we'll get to that here with our next question. But we don't have a real good feel on it. How good is the Big 12? I mean,
Yeah.
BYU, Kansas, Texas Tech, Houston, all are going to be probably top 10 or fringe top 10. And Arizona's right there with them. Fran Fraschilla talked about that the other week on
Yep.
her show.
Great interview.
So we don't know where we're at. So expect the thrill ride to come in basketball yet again.
Yeah. And I think we all talking about, we wish Carter Bryant had come back. I mean, Caleb Love, let's not overstate how big that is,
Yeah.
because, for better or for worse, he was that alpha that you talk about.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the alpha? Who's going to be the guy who's going to try to take over late in games? Caleb Love was willing to be that guy. Did it work out always? No, it didn't even most of the time. But obviously against Iowa State, and then the NCAA tournament, he came alive. Who's going to be the guy to take over? Is it going to be one of the freshmen? Is it going to be maybe Jaden Bradley this time next season? I don't know, but they have to have someone. You want. I think for like the first 35 minutes of a game or so, it really is important to have that balance and have that depth. And the last few minutes of a close game, it's important to have that one guy who's willing to take over. And that's the big question. Does Arizona have a guy who's willing to do that, who's like willing to not, who doesn't shrink from the moment and is able to execute in that? And that is the biggest question going into this season with Caleb Love's absence.
Yeah, right. We don't know who that is. Is it Koa Pete? Could be. I think Jaden Bradley is going to take up more of a scoring role this year. But then again, Braden Brace come and be a 20-point a game guy. We don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Never know.
unpredictability, like we didn't know what to expect from Carter Bryant. And the difference is that Carter Bryant didn't start, and Braden Burries and Koa Pete are going to start for Arizona.
Yeah.
But which of these other freshmen too are going to step up? And
Yeah.
that's why I want to ask you, as far as number two, not necessarily a buy or sell, but CBS Sports has men's basketball at number 11 in their offseason rankings. ESPN number 13 and On3 Sports number 20. Those are three of the samplings that I saw. I guess buy or sell from here is Arizona is being underrated with the talent they have on the roster.
I'll sell it just because, again, we don't know what we're going to get. I think that's reasonable. I mean, that they with the talent they have. I mean, like if everything comes together, if there's so many ifs, but if Koa Pete and Brain Berries are the real deal, if Karchenkov and Gay end up being instant contributors and taking to the American college game like ducks to water, then the sky's the limit. They bring back Jaden Bradley. They have Mo Krivas back. I mean, I feel like he's kind of a newcomer, even though he's not. Kind of like Henry Vasar last year. Anthony Delorso's back. Toby Awaka's back. So they have all again on paper, because that's all we have right now in July. That they have the ability to be top 10, top 5. But I think a lot of people who are making these early projections are like, okay, well, we'll believe it when we see it. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But again, the polls, the preseason polls don't mean anything, and obviously the regular season polls don't either. You like to see your team ranked; it's fun to talk about. But I don't think any of those are unreasonable. If you want to have Arizona in the top 10, I think that's realistic. If you want to have them toward the bottom of the top 25, I don't really have a problem with that at this point. I think they should be probably somewhere in there in the top 25. But again, I like the fact that we've talked about this so many times, but I like the fact that this team, same as last year, they're going to be tested from the very beginning of the season to the very end of the season, and they could go in as a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, but face teams that they faced the kind of caliber of teams they faced all year, if not some of the better. They may have faced better competition in the regular season, and I think that's going to have them as prepared for the postseason as much as anything. Because rankings are one thing, but the NCAA tournament, getting to the Final Four, is a whole other thing.
To me, I think Arizona's a little underrated this offseason. I think the freshmen are this good. I think they're going to live up to the hype. I think Arizona's a top 10 team in the country. Without, diving deep into, all the other teams, I'm not saying Arizona's with the caliber of a Houston or a Purdue with returning players, but I think talent-wise, with Tommy Lloyd, and I'm not saying that means they're going to get past Sweet 16 this year, but probably my goal at the outset here, without knowing what we have, I think an Elite Eight seems about what we should hope for. I think that would be about right.
And I think that's fair, but the tournament is such a wild card. I mean, if they could go in as a 1 seed and get ousted in the second round, they could go in as a 5 or a 6 seed and go all the way to the Final Four. I mean, a lot of it comes down to luck of the draw and just how everything comes together late in the season. I thought it did for Arizona last season too. I thought they got past Oregon in the second round, got to the Sweet 16. They had to face Duke in the Sweet 16. If they had faced a team the caliber of Clemson the year before, they probably advanced. So a lot of it just comes down to that. So there's a difference between, are they a top 10 team and can they get to the Final Four? I know we're talking so much basketball here in July. It's kind of crazy, but that just is the reality of college basketball. And you figure the luck has to even out for Arizona at some point. For a program that's as heralded as a brand as this program is, that hasn't been to the Final Four since 2001. You think eventually things have got to even out, and hopefully they will at some point.
All right, but hold on a second. Of all the, of all the teams that Tommy Lloyd has, this one, if healthy, you have to make it to at least the second weekend. You can't, I don't care what the matchups look like, if healthy, on paper, senior point guard, senior big man, you got to make it to at least the second weekend, or it's a massive disappointment.
I just think it's easier to say that now. We'll have to see, because you think about last season. I think we were kind of thinking the same way last season, like maybe Sweet 16 or bust, and then toward the end of the non-conference schedule, you were thinking, you weren't the only one, but you were thinking this team probably isn't going to make the NCAA tournament. No. And so by the time we got there and they got to the Sweet 16 and they lost to a very good Duke team in the round of 16, we're thinking, okay, it was a pretty good season. Would we have been happy about that at the beginning of the season? Maybe, maybe not. So, it's like with football. Last year, we were expecting big things, and we probably shouldn't have. This year, it'd just be nice if we can get to a bowl game again. So expectations change year to year, and in football and basketball, sometimes they change week to week as well.
With that said, there is nothing like the excitement of having your team available to go to the second weekend.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah. No, it's fun. Like, it's just fun to dream about what might happen.
Right.
I mean, even going into the game against Duke, I was not expecting Arizona to win, but it's just fun to think, okay, here we are again. They're 2 games away from getting back to the Final Four. Just that hope, which I know is always a brutal thing in sports, but just having that opportunity. I feel like sometimes that's even better than the game itself. Like when you have a big game in front of you, like when Arizona was going to the Alamo Bowl, or they were going to the Pac-12 championship game in 2014, which I know didn't go well, but just the anticipation, just knowing that opportunity is in front of you. I think as a sports fan for both my pro and college sports teams, I think that might be sometimes more exciting than the game itself, because you just have to soak it up too, because you never have, all you know is you have the opportunity. You're not promised anything else.
Well, I know we've gotten off on a tangent here talking basketball, but I just, this team should be exciting. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think football is going to be interesting. Yeah. One team that we haven't talked about yet really is baseball. And so Baseball America came out with their way early top 25, and Arizona was not in it.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of a surprise to me and you, considering they got Tony Plutas back as their ace closer. They lost some pieces, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I think this is a team that just got to Omaha. You would think that they belong in the top 25.
Yeah, and they didn't just get to Omaha; they were in the top 25 for a good chunk of this past season. So yeah, I'll buy that they should be in there. Again, it's very early; those polls don't matter, yada yada yada. But we're talking about it. So, they do lose a lot of hitting. Mason White, Brendan Summerhill, several other guys. But it's not the first time that Chip has been able to reload after losing a lot of players, a lot of hitters to the draft. And he reloaded the pitching position last year too. And as of this moment, they do return some pretty talented pitchers, including Tony Pluta, like you said, who just announced he's coming back. So, yeah, a little surprised at that. Not that it matters at this point, but I clicked on the link expecting to see Arizona in there somewhere. You keep scrolling down. You're like, okay, no, maybe I guess they're not top 15. Okay, I guess they're not top 20. And then what? ASU was in there.
Really?
Yeah, ASU was 22.
And they lost a lot in the draft. They lost a lot.
Yeah. ASU was in there, but not Arizona. So I was a little surprised by that. Does it matter? No, but I do. Baseball America is a very respected publication, and I think they missed a boat on that.
All right, let's talk about a little football before we bring on Phil Steele. So Arizona's inducting Nick Foles into the Arizona Sports Hall of Fame. Shane, buy or sell, we made a mistake by not putting him or even really discussing him on our Mount Rushmore of Arizona football players.
Yeah, I kind of snuck out the Nick Foles bobblehead you see behind me that I haven't opened from when I was at ABC 15. Our sports director, Craig Fooey, received it, and he was gracious enough to give it to me. So it's one of my prized sports possessions. But yeah, it's a fair question. I really like this one. On the one hand, I think there are 4 players in Arizona history, at least, who are probably worthy of those spots ahead of Nick Foles. But on the other hand, he's probably the greatest quarterback in the history of the program, isn't he? And if so, what does that say about the quality of Arizona's quarterbacks in the lifetime of the program if one of its top 4 players all time isn't a quarterback? But I just think the reality is that Arizona, it just made me think that Arizona really is a program that's probably produced more on the defensive side of the ball, both during their time at Arizona and at the pro level. Ricky Hundley, Teddy Bruschi, Rob Waldrop, Lance Briggs, Chuck Cecil, Chris McAllister, Antoine Cason, Brandon Sanders. There's a lot of guys I didn't mention there who you can name. You can name a lot more. I stand by the list that we created, even though we got some good feedback. I think maybe there was maybe another defensive guy who could have gone above another guy. But, I was thinking about, okay, if you're just talking about the offensive side of the ball, who would be your top 4? Who would be your Mount Rushmore? I think Nick would be in there along with Kadeem Carey, probably Rob Gronkowski, and then maybe Tedoroa McMillan. You can make an argument for a different wide receiver, but I think those would be my 4. I hate to leave the offensive linemen out because Arizona's had a lot of good ones over the years with, Eben Britton and Jordan Morgan and some others. But, when you think offense, you think the guys who touch the football, and that would probably be my 4. So it's a good question, but I think there are 4 players probably on the defensive side of the ball who made a bigger impact on the program than Nick Foles did.
In terms of a college career, Nick Foles should not be in the top 10 when we're talking about Arizona Mount Rushmore.
Maybe.
And most of the guys are going to come from defense, as you said, Shane. So, it's a fair point. But, Kadeem Carey, Tedoroa McMillan, right off the bat, trunk candidate has to be in there.
You want to go way back, Art Lupino, who Kadeem Carey broke his records?
But see, most fans don't know Art Lupino, so that's why you can't put him on the Mount Rushmore because they don't. Very well, true. But if we're talking in the last 35 years, let's go 1990 to present is where your Mount Rushmore comes from. Maybe offensively, but Gronk, T-Mac, Kadeem Carey, trunk candidate would probably be the 4 easy ones. I think Nick Foles would be up there. Some people are probably going to say Khalil Tate, but he just basically had one little breakthrough of a season. I don't think that was enough to do it.
Another what might have been, if he had stayed healthy, and then if Rich Rod had stayed, you never know what might have been. Right. But I think we're going into last season. We're thinking that maybe Noah Fifita could end up leaving Arizona as the best quarterback in the history of the program, and now we're not thinking that way. But Seth Diggy turns it around, and Noah stays for 4 years. You never know. But I think Nick. It's just funny because I think just most programs you would think that if they, you list their top 4 players of all time, most programs would have a quarterback in there, at least one quarterback. And Arizona doesn't. Arizona's had a lot of very good quarterbacks with Nick Foles and Tom Tunnicliffe and Willie Tuatama, Dan White, Ortiz Jenkins, but none that you would immediately come to mind as like who are the best players in the history of the program. And I also forgot to mention Scooby Wright on the defensive side of the ball more recently. So.
Also want to give our thoughts to Kadeem Carey. We've never had him on the show, but he sustained a pretty serious leg injury for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, probably out for the season. And at 32, who knows how many more opportunities he's going to get to play pro ball. Had a nice Canadian football career. Sorry it didn't work out for him in the NFL. Wish he had stayed another year at Arizona, but hey, he's was able to pave out a pro career, and we're grateful for that.
Yeah, and I wrote a second book about the rivalry between Rich Rodriguez and Todd Graham, and Kadeem was kind enough to talk to me for that book when he was living in Calgary, playing for the Stampeders. He did win a Grey Cup with the Toronto Argonauts, which is awesome. And then he was playing for Saskatchewan. So I know that his NFL career didn't work out. I thought for sure he'd be a great NFL player, so you just never know. But he carved out a good career for himself in Canada, and best wishes to him. Hopefully, at 32 and with that kind of injury, you got to wonder if that's the end of the line for him as a running back. But certainly, best wishes and regardless, congrats on a successful career north of the border because he's definitely had that.
Ditto that. Calling all Wildcat fans, did you know that Harrah's Auction Casino is your local home for Caesars Rewards? Every play unlocks perks at more than 50 destinations nationwide. Enjoy free dining in Atlantic City, hotel stays in New Orleans, and exclusive rewards from coast to coast. Sign up today, earn reward credits, and experience nationwide play only at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Caesars Rewards in Arizona, as well as the official sponsor of Wildcat Country, and we're always grateful to have them on board our program. Coming up next, for the 5th straight July. It's Phil Steele here on Wildcat Country. Shane, for the 5th straight year, we are very, very lucky to be joined by the great Phil Steele. You can check him out, philsteele.com. You've got to buy the magazine. I am an early bird subscriber every year, Phil. When it comes, as I told you off air, when it comes in June in the mail, it's the only magazine I buy all year. It is the Bible of college football. We're so glad to have you on to talk some Arizona football. I want to start with this. You ranked Arizona very low, and I don't want to give it fully away, but you ranked it very low in the Big 12, but you actually came away with your write-ups quite optimistic that they could exceed your projections. Explain why you think that.
Well, it's the second year for Coach Brennan, and let's face it, last year was unusual circumstances. He took over the team late. A lot of players left in the portal. It was an inexperienced squad. And then they suffered a lot of injuries on both the offensive and defensive line. It was a great start to the season at 3-1, and then the Texas Tech game, they had that thing basically won, ended up losing by 6, and then the season sort of got out of control on them. I think when you look at the overall talent on this year's squad and compare it against the schedule, the Big 12 has a very tough schedule this year for them with 5 road games and only 4 home games. That's why I picked them lower, but it's second year for Brennan. You got a quarterback back in Fafita. You've got a much more veteran defense this year. There's a lot of signs that could point upwards for Arizona.
Bill, you've gotten a chance to get to know Brent Brennan a bit these last couple of years. What do you think he learned from his first year as a coach in a power conference? Because a lot of Arizona fans are thinking, well, maybe he's just not cut out for this big a job. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think that at all. What the job he did at San Jose was pretty remarkable. I remember going over the squad with him the first year. I believe he was a first-year head coach with a first-year offensive coordinator and a first-year defensive coordinator. And they had a very young team, and he built that thing and built it strong. And now you take a look at where he's at with Arizona. I thought it was a tough circumstance for Arizona last year. They were coming off a remarkable year. They lost a lot to the transfer portal. Their coach not only left to go to Washington, but took a lot of players with them, including their leading rusher from the previous year. So you figured Arizona was going to struggle last season. And then the injuries they suffered on both the offensive and defensive lines was huge. I think Brent Brennan's a quality coach. And, I think that year 2, yes, I talked to all the coaches, right? Almost every second-year coach I've ever talked to, hey, coach, how you feeling this year? Oh, Phil, it's night and day from last year. The players now know the offense, players know the defense. I know the players. It's a completely different story, and I think that's going to be the case with Brent Brennan this year.
And hopefully you're correct about that. Speaking of transitions into year 2, tell me about Seth Doege. We had him on the show. We like him. I think Eric and I both feel very optimistic about the future of the offense with him at the helm. What do you think of the hire, and how do you think he'll do coaching Noah Fafita?
Well, I think he's going to look solid in his first year because last year Arizona was under expectations with just 21.8 points per game. Heck, I'd like to be the offense coordinator this year because you're going to get better offensive output and you're going to look pretty good. And I thought last year when you look at Arizona's offense, that basically was trying to get the ball to McMillan. I mean, McMillan had 3 times as many catches as anybody else. It's going to be a more balanced receiving core this year and probably one with a little more speed. I thought one of the problems last year was they didn't really have that number 2 receiver to go to. It was basically McMillan or bust, and I think it's going to be a different situation this year. Adding a guy like Chris Hudson coming in at wide receiver, Burnett at tight end, Wysong coming in from New Mexico, and the fact that Fafita is going to be spreading the field out a little bit more, I think it's going to be a pretty productive unit. The offensive line figures to be better as well. So you look at what the job Doege did at Marshall last year, which was solid. They won the title in the Sun Belt Conference, and he's been under some pretty good head coaches, in his time. So I think he's going to do fine as the offensive coordinator. And like I said, I think he'll look good at the end of the year.
Phil, you talk pretty glowingly about Arizona's running back situation. They lost Quali Conley. They obviously last year, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt played 1 game and had a weird eligibility situation. This year, Kedrick Grisano is back, and now they added Ismail Mahdi from Texas State and Quincy Craig from Portland State. What can you tell us, in your opinion, about Arizona's running back situation?
Yeah, and when I talked to Coach Brennan, he felt that it was a much improved room this year, that any of the top 3 could start. And the surprising one when he said any of the top 3 would start would be Quincy Craig. But here's the thing I found, guys. I'm analyzing all these teams as I go through them with the coaches, and there is actually a higher percentage of hits on these FCS guys moving up than there is on the P2 guys coming down that haven't played. As long as they've got the experience level, they come in, they love the training table, they love the weight room, they get bigger, stronger, faster, and they've got the experience level now playing there. And Craig was a pleasant surprise in the spring. He's like an all-around back. And he made a lot of big plays in the spring, got good hands out of the backfield. Then you got Mahdi coming in from Texas State, nearly 1,000-yard rusher. I mean, 9 yards away from 1,000 yards. We had the previous year, he had 1,300 yards. And then Riscano was the backup last year, but highly productive. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry. So I think they've got depth at the running back position, 3 quality guys that can run the football. I think they're in pretty good shape.
All right, well, that makes me feel good about the running back situation. What doesn't make me feel good in general is the offensive line, which was dreadful. It got hurt a lot last year. But also, you kind of seemed more optimistic than I would be, and I'm a fanboy for Arizona, about Arizona's offensive line. What do you make of them this year?
Yeah, and it's a completely new unit base. Well, almost. They had in 7 transfers this year. And as mentioned, if you're bringing in a transfer, you got to have that experience level, right? And they've got 4 of them that were starters. A guy like Ty Buchanan coming in from Texas Tech, he's a guy that is an outstanding blocker. He's 6'6", 310. He's got a lot of experience. Started last year, 7 games. I think he's going to have a fine impact. You look at Deuce at the right guard spot. He's another kid that potential all-conference. I like to pick up DeCambria coming in from Hawaii at center. He had 12 starts last year. He's a 2-year starter. So I think there is talent that they have on the line. Last year, they were trying to bring them together, and then they suffered the injuries. As long as they stay healthy up front, I think this will be a much improved offensive line this year.
And hopefully you're right about that. I said a bunch of times, and I'm not the only one who said it, that football, for all its complexities, it's pretty simple in terms of wins and losses. If you win the battle up front on both sides of the ball, you're going to win more often than not. You touched on the offensive line already. You have Arizona next to last in the Big 12 on the defensive line going into the season. If Arizona is going to do better than that projection, how are they going to do it? Who's going to have to step up?
A couple of the transfers they brought in, you look at Deshaun McKnight coming in from UT Martin. Now, he had 4 sacks at UT Martin from his defensive tackle spot. That's pretty good. Shows some penetration inside. And then Savea coming in from Texas. Now, he's one of those P2 guys turned down. You look at the fact he hasn't played, and you might say, well, he hasn't really played. But look at who he's been behind at Texas the last 2 years. Those are some outstanding players. So I think now that he's finally given the starting job, he may play up to the level that we thought he was when he came out. Trey Smith is a guy that had 4.5 sacks last year, one of the team's better pass rushers. If he can get more sacks, bring really more pressure off the edge, he'll be in good shape. But there are question marks on the defensive line. They need those 3 guys to really step up.
Looking at the secondary and along with the receiver, I think that's the position you're most bullish on for Arizona relative to other Big 12 teams. They lose Dwayne Aquina, obviously, but they bring a lot of talent back in the secondary. What are your overall thoughts on that unit?
I talked about Arizona's start last year. They were 3-1. And then they lose Traden Stukes to injury. Now, if he could come back and be 100% after missing the majority last year, that's a nice pickup to get. It's like bringing back a returning starter. Groves Killebrew is another guy that's made a lot of strides, I think, at cornerback. Last year was a learning year for him, coming in from Louisville. He started 6 games, made a lot of strides this spring. I think he's grown into potentially an all-conference caliber cornerback. And then another Texas guy that hasn't played a lot, but he did start 13 games in the Mountain West for San Jose State, and Javion Cole, and Dalton Johnson's back. So I think overall, when you look at this secondary this year, they definitely are more experienced, I'd say, than last year. And getting Stukes back, I think, is a big-time addition.
Phil, do you think it's fair, in your opinion, for Arizona fans to say, hey, if Brent Brennan doesn't make a bowl game this year, we need a coaching change?
I think that'd be tough. You look at the schedule this year, they're probably going to be an underdog in 8 or 9 games, probably 8 games this year, maybe even 9 when you look at them. So it's a tough schedule. I think Brennan has a shot at getting to a bowl game, but I think coaches really reach their peak in year 3. That's when the majority of the team is made of their roster, their players. And I think the circumstances he was thrown into in year 1 were really difficult. Take a look at Jed Fish. His first year, he went 1-11. Second year, didn't have a winning year, went 5-7. Stuck with them, and guess what? Third year, 10-3. I've seen that a lot of head coaches. Year 3 is the year that they generally make their hay.
You know what, Phil? You kind of sold me because I was saying bowl game or bust for Brennan, but you're actually right. I mean, the Jed Fish comparison is great. If Arizona can improve, maybe go 5-7, come up close in a few other games. I totally understand that. Just in general in the Big 12, I kind of mocked the season and had, simulated it, and I had 12 teams making bowl games. Would you put the over under at 11.5? Which one are you taking?
I'd have to go 12. I think we're going to see. I mean, the Big 12 is got so much talent top to bottom, and it's tough to. Yeah, I could easily go 12. I'm gonna agree with you there. I'm going over on the 11.5 in that one. There's so much balance in the Big 12. Now, here's the thing: teams to make the playoff. I'm going to say 1. Why is that? Because there's so much balance in the Big 12. You're going to have teams beating each other every week. You end up at the end of the season, you're a really good team with 3 losses because everybody's playing each other. And I think there's 8 legitimate teams that have a shot at winning the title, and they're all playing each other during the course of the year. So I think one Big 12 team makes the playoff, but I'll go with you with 12 teams making the bowls.
Yeah, Arizona goes from one conference that like to cannibalize each other to another one that does the same thing, pretty much. All right, 2 more for you, Phil. If there's a path to 6 wins for Arizona, and I'm with you, if they show improvement and win 4 or 5 games, I'm good with that for this year. But if they're going to get to 6 wins in a bowl game, how do they do it? What's the most likely path?
Well, unlike last year, let's keep the offensive line and the defensive line healthy. That would be a good start there. And then I think when you take a look at last year, there were some close losses. I mentioned the Texas Tech game, also the game against West Virginia. But I think getting off to a good start, that Kansas State game is going to be huge. And the thing I like about the Kansas State game is they're coming back from Ireland. And I talked to Georgia Tech's head coach, and he said it really didn't hit us till a couple of weeks after we came back from Ireland. That's when the jet lag really played in. So if that happens, it's on a Friday, Arizona's pumped up, and they get that win. Then all of a sudden you've got a young team playing with confidence. And confidence is a big factor in college football, especially when it comes to the second half of the season. I think the Oklahoma State game is winnable at home. Kansas is winnable at home. Even the Colorado game on the road, winnable. BYU, heck, we don't know what's going to happen. Who's their new quarterback going to be? How is he going to play? And we saw last year, Arizona played with Utah, went on the road and won that game. We're outplaying Texas Tech. Probably should have won that game. So I think that, yes, the possibility clearly exists to get to a bowl game. Early season success, I'm going to circle that Kansas State game as my key. Win that thing, go 3-0. I think they get to a bowl game.
Agree 100%. And it's still weird to have a non-conference game. And I know Brent Brennan's not thrilled about that, but it is a big one. Last question for you, Phil. We appreciate it as always. It's hard to believe it's already been 5 years, but we appreciate you taking time for us every single year. Don't want to give everything in your magazine away, but just tell us, who do you think are the contenders to win the Big 12 this year?
You got about a half hour as I run down the entire list of them. It's funny, and I'll make it a little bit shorter, but here's the teams I think are the legitimate contenders: Baylor, Utah, Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, TCU, and heck, even BYU if they get good quarterback play. Now, what was my differentiating factor? It was the schedule. I took the teams that had the best schedule in the Big 12. In other words, of those 8 teams, who got the majority of them at home? And there are some of the teams that are probably pretty high in the preseason polls, like Arizona State, like Kansas State, and like Texas Tech, who have pretty tough schedules. Arizona State, for example, plays Baylor on the road, Utah on the road, Iowa State on the road. You take a look at Texas Tech, and by the way, Joe McGuire's doing a great job there. They're loaded with talent. They brought in a lot of transfers. They are 15-5 at home, 6-10 on the road. Who do they play on the road? Utah, Arizona State, Kansas State, and oh, by the way, Houston. Don't fall asleep on them. They had a hell of a defense last year, and their offense is much improved. Now, who's got the best schedule? Like Baylor, for example, their road games: Arizona, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and TCU. They play one of the big boys on the road, so they've got the best schedule, along with Utah and Iowa State. And with Utah, the thing you look out there is Coach Winningham told me it's the best offensive line he's had had there in his 21 years. He's had some pretty good offensive lines. So those are three homegrown teams, a lot of freshmen, not a lot of transfers, and very experienced teams, and they get the majority of the big games at home.
As I was looking through the Big 12 schedule, I'm sitting there with my Phil Steele magazine in hand, all right, got to look at returning starters. Phil, it's like a Bible. First of all, can you explain to our listeners, how do you get all this information? Just summarize your year in a minute if you can.
Okay, during the season, I'm watching 12 games. And then during the week, I go through and watch any games close up that I can. I go through the play-by-play of every single game. But we start the magazine at the Sunday after Thanksgiving. 7 months of work goes in. I do it in a 3 write-through process. The first write-through, I read through every article that was written about the team from the previous year. And then do my first write-through, which is what kind of shape was the unit heading into last year? What happened last year? What do I look for this year? Now, I know the last part of that, last third, that's going to change during the spring. And the second write-through is done once I get the spring rosters. We've updated the freshmen, the transfers. I do the rewrite. And then the third is after talking to the head coaches. And that's the most important one. Go over the roster with them. Spend generally about an hour with each one, going over every player, every unit. And then I modify it and get it at the end. I've got a staff here that compiles all the stats. If there's a stat you need, I feel it's like getting 136 media guides rolled into one. But it's a 7-month process to put this magazine out each year, and it's definitely a labor of love.
Phil, I don't know how you do it. It's absolutely incredible every year when I read it. Last thing here, can you tell people who haven't bought their Phil Steele magazine or their online subscription, how can they do it?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eric. Yeah, if you're going to look for it, don't look at everywhere. Don't go to the grocery stores, places like that. It's only available at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. Those are the only 2 locations. We're exclusively with them, Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. Now, if you don't have one in your area, just go to philsteele.com. And when you go to philsteele.com, tons of information, but you can buy the magazine. When you buy the magazine, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. It costs to ship things. However, I give you the digital magazine absolutely free. In the digital magazine, we update all the way through September. So the only places to get it are Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com.
And let me say this, even after college football season, I'm still reading my Phil Steele magazine. I was reading the 2024 version up until May. Listen, there are guys that are still coming back. I need to learn about players. I need to learn about more about the history of the game and teams. Phil, you have everything in there. It is the Bible of college football. We always appreciate you coming on with us for the 5th straight year and look forward to doing it again, hopefully in 2026.
Hey, sounds great. And I always enjoy talking Arizona football. I had mentioned to you off air, Eric, I do all these national shows. We very rarely talk about Arizona. I get to hone in on it with you guys, so I appreciate you having me on.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Really good stuff, Shane, to talk to Phil Steele. I don't know how the guy does it. I don't know how he has a life. I don't know how he writes that many rewrites. I get annoyed when I have to write a bunch of rewrites for whatever. And this guy's writing 130-something teams 3 times over. It's unbelievable.
If our buddy Matt Moreno is the professor, is Phil the dean, the professor emeritus, or what would you call him?
I mean, he produces the Bible of college football. I mean, that's what it is. Everybody reads it. You know, I didn't really get into Phil Steele until I was, I don't know, probably in my early 30s, over a decade ago. And I'd buy like the Athlon or Lindy's. And no disrespect to those people, to those guys who put it together. Phil's knowledge of every team, the fact that he could speak to Arizona like that, and he could speak to any team like that, that's another level.
And, you know, we have a lot of guests on, like, where I'm careful, or I'll ask them ahead of time, hey, is it okay if I ask you about this? Because I'm not sure what their level of knowledge is, and we want to make sure that they're able to answer a question sufficiently. With Phil, Not a concern. I know I can ask him any nitty-gritty question about college football, about Arizona
Yeah.
football, about the roster, and he's got it at his fingertips. And so that's just a luxury knowing that I can spit out any question at him and he's going to have an answer like that.
Gonna have an answer. It's incredible. Let's talk about Memphis here for a second. So they came up with a campaign that they wanted to pay the Big 12 $200 million to take them,
Yeah.
and then not take any revenue. To me, and correct me if I'm wrong, this seems like a slam dunk for the conference. Why would you not do that?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to have a financial expert back on the show because I'm not great at that side of things, but it just seems like because it's all about football, and Memphis's football brand just wasn't up there. I mean, they've had some good years over the. I mean, back when Norvell was the coach, they did very well for a while, but they don't have. I think it's a lot of it's more about perception and brand recognition as well. Like we talk about Arizona men's basketball, they have been to a Final Four since '01, but I think in terms of brand recognition, they're probably top 10 nationally. Memphis, you could argue they've had. I mean, they've had some better seasons than Arizona's had, but they don't have that respect. Even though Arizona football is not a national huge brand, it's still, it has its moments. It's recognized nationally, and so I think the value dilution was a concern for the Big 12, and they had was it at least 12 of the 16 Big 12 presidents did not, or at least I guess they needed support from 12 of the 16, and they didn't have that. It'd be interesting. I don't know if we know how many supported it, but it didn't sound like very many. So. I guess if you're going to turn down 200 million, there's got to be some more to behind the scenes, and just the concern that the brand just isn't the Big 12 brand itself was going to take a hit based on it. So you think that it would be like you said, a slam dunk. Yeah, that's a ridiculous amount of money, but there must be more to it in terms of brand recognition than we realize.
Yeah, for me, I would have taken that deal and figured it out from there. I think that's a lot of money. You divide that by 16 teams, everybody getting another 10 million. They wouldn't
Yeah.
take a revenue cut for a while. I think that's plenty worthwhile, especially in this day and age, of NIL. I mean, that money, Arizona could have used that money. So
Yeah, and
I look at it and I say,
yeah, no, it's sorry, I was gonna say it's just perception over reality sometimes. That they had 11 straight. Memphis had 11 straight seasons where they were at least 500. They had a Cotton Bowl appearance in 2019. But the perception there just isn't very good. And usually, basket or football is king. Even though Big 12 is probably known mostly for men's basketball right now, football is king. And Memphis just didn't have that recognition. It just goes to show you how important branding and marketing is.
I think you are probably right. I want to ask one more question about college sports, and then we'll move along to next week. Does the NCAA, in your opinion, need to implement a one-time transfer rule? I read something earlier this week about coaches. I can't remember if it was an SEC, Big Ten, or ACC coach that said, "Hey, listen, we got to do something here and put in a one-time transfer rule. And then if they want to transfer again, you got to sit out a year, just like the old rule used to be."
Yeah, if I remember right, Fran Fraschilla, he suggested the same thing when he was on with us. I mean,
Yeah, that's
specifically
true.
for
Yeah.
basketball. But yeah, I think so. I think that's fair. I think, and you got to take, if it's if you're a grad transfer or it's a hardship situation. Like I remember Momo Jones when he was at Arizona and he transferred to Iona to be closer to his grandmother who was sick. So that I totally get. But yeah, I think something has, especially with NIL involved. Like you have to, if you want to make more money somewhere else, fine, but you got to sit out a year. I think that will level it as far as realistic things to level the playing field right now, because right now things are going to be in court. We're going to have court cases for years over this stuff, if not decades. That would be the easiest way to even things out. It's like you have to weigh the pros and cons. Right now it's you can bolt and go make twice or three times as much more money somewhere else. You're going to do that if you're a college athlete who's you've probably never seen that close to that much money in your whole life. But if you have to think about it and you have to sit out a year like you used to, then maybe things aren't quite as clear. So yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. I think that's not the only thing that needs to be done, but I think that would be the most common sense measure at this point, and one that the NCAA should be able to implement.
This is the biggest no-brainer I've ever heard. I mean, the fact that these guys, unless a coach leaves, then you put in a rule that, hey, if your head coach or position coach leaves, then you have a transfer period.
Agree.
There's got to be one transfer portal, and Brent Brennan talked to you and me about this in May. There should be one period, and you can get one free transfer. And then unless there's a hardship or a coach that leaves or something like that, you shouldn't be able to transfer.
Yeah.
We have to do something to curtail in all the sports, these lower division kids that are good there, and then they leave and go to another school and do it like multiple times. So one thing, if you do it once, I understand. Okay, you take your shot. But then if you doesn't work out, then you got to go back to. I'm sorry, but I don't like it unless there's coaching movement. We gotta bring it back to where there's some solidarity, so you know who's going to be on your roster, and the fact that coaches don't have to re-recruit their entire roster every year, because that to me is just foolish.
Agree 100%. And I think of all the crazy things that have been implemented, that you touched on this, the craziest thing is having a transfer portal window during the season. Like, I know after the regular season, but the bowl games are. Imagine in the NFL. If free agency began after the regular season and going to the wild card round, it's ridiculous. It's insane that exists. So yeah, that is an absolute no-brainer. If nothing else, one transfer portal window in the off season, and then you add that to the one-time only rule, and I think that solves not all the problems, but probably like half of it right there in terms of just coaches having to coach, recruit, and re-recruit. It's absolutely insane.
So here's what's coming up on Wildcat Country in the coming weeks. Next show, Shane and I are going to break down the Big 12. We're going to rank them 1 to 16. Last year, okay, we were a bit off.
No,
this
I'm not
year,
talking about it.
I went through and picked every game in the Big 12 for every team. And I'm going to tell you records, and I will see if you decide to do the same or if you're just going to rank them 1 to 16. And then a few weeks after that, we're going to do our season predictions like we did last year with Blair Willis. And, obviously then it's week 1 coming up. So we're getting there. I think only 3 shows before we really start breaking it down before week 0, before we can make a Kansas State, Iowa State pick in Ireland. But that'll be fun. But that was a great show with Phil Steele, Shane. Always appreciate having Phil on, and look forward to it. We're getting closer. We've made it through the summer, and here we are.
Hey, I'll tell you, we're still working hard for you. If you're listening or you're watching, we appreciate it. We've had, just in the last 3 weeks, Fran Fischilla, Becky Burke, and Phil Steele. It's a decent trio of guests, and we're working on getting some more throughout football season. So appreciate you hanging with us. I know it's kind of tough time of the year to stay focused on college sports and Arizona athletics, but we've had plenty to talk about, and glad to have you join us.
As always, we appreciate Phil Steele coming on for the 5th straight year. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and as always, bear down.